battle against corruption remains a defining struggle in its post-independence history, with recent crackdowns and asset recovery efforts signaling both progress and persistent challenges. Under President William Ruto's administration, which took office in September 2022, the government has vowed a renewed push against graft, including the formation of a presidential anti-corruption team and international partnerships for asset tracing. Yet, scandals implicating Ruto and his allies have fueled skepticism, raising questions about the perceived selective nature of justice. We examine the historical context, major scandals, current initiatives, legal frameworks, human rights implications, societal impacts, and recommendations for sustainable reform.
Corruption in Kenya dates back to the colonial era, but exploded after independence in 1963 as patronage networks and state capture became tools for political survival. The 1970s and 1980s under President Jomo Kenyatta saw early signs of systemic looting, but it was under his successor, Daniel Arap Moi, 1978 to 2002, that grand corruption peaked. The infamous Goldenberg scandal, 1990s, involved fake gold and diamond exports, costing Kenya an estimated $1 billion, which equates to 10% of GDP at the time, through fraudulent subsidies to businessman Kamlesh Patni. This affair, which implicated high-level officials, led to economic collapse and international isolation.
The early 2000s brought hope with the National Rainbow Coalition's 2002 victory. But scandals like Anglo Leasing, a fictitious company siphoning $600 million for passports and security equipment, exposed ongoing rot during Mwai Kibaki's tenure between the years 2002 and 2013. Uhuru Kenyatta's era between the years 2013 and 2022 was marred by the National Youth Service or NYS scandal, $80 million in ghost payments, and the Eurobond controversy where billions allegedly vanished from public coffers. These episodes entrenched a culture where corruption drained resources from essential services, exacerbating poverty and inequality. By the year 2022, Transparency International ranked Kenya their 126th out of 180 countries on its Corruption Perceptions Index, with annual losses estimated at 7.8% of GDP.
Ruto's rise to power was framed as an anti-corruption crusade promising hustler reforms against the elite. However, his administration has faced accusations of perpetuating the cycle, with critics pointing to dropped cases against allies and rising public debt amid graft allegations. One of the most long-standing allegations tied to Ruto has been the Weston Hotel land saga. The land on which Ruto's Weston Hotel in Nairobi stands was allegedly illegally acquired from the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA, a state corporation. A government report found the title was issued irregularly after the land was earmarked for government use. He has maintained that he purchased the land legitimately from a private company. The case became a symbol of alleged impunity, as efforts by the National Land Commission (NLC) to have the hotel demolished or for the land to be compensated for failed for years. The matter has largely gone quiet since Ruto assumed the presidency, with critics citing it as an example of unresolved historical corruption.
Following the tragic collapse of the Solai Dam in 2018, which killed over 40 people, investigations pointed to irregular allocations of public land. Reports alleged that the land containing the dam was part of a larger scheme of land grabbing in the area. Ruto's name was mentioned by political opponents and in some media investigations as having benefited from or been involved in controversial land acquisitions in the wider Nakuru region. He has dismissed these allegations as political witch hunts. These remain historical allegations that were never conclusively proven in court, but form part of the narrative used by his critics.
During his tenure as deputy president, several companies associated with Ruto's family and close allies were reported to have won multi-million shilling tenders from state-owned enterprises. A notable example was the alleged involvement of companies linked to his family in contracts at the Kenya Pipeline Company. He defended the tenders, stating that his family members had a right to engage in business and that all processes were followed. This case fueled a debate on conflict of interest and whether families of high-ranking officials should be allowed to bid for government contracts.
While the massive KEMSA scandal occurred under President Kenyatta,
A new controversy emerged in 2023 under Ruto's administration. Dubbed KEMSA Light, it involved the alleged irregular procurement of mosquito nets under a $40 million global fund grant. The scandal led to the suspension of KEMSA officials. While not directly implicated, the scandal implicated his appointees and tested his administration's promise of accountability. The response was criticized as slow and lacking transparency, leading to questions about whether those responsible were being protected due to political connections.
In 2018, as deputy president, Ruto was accused by opposition leaders of being behind a scheme to illegally import sugar, which flooded the market and threatened local farmers. The sugar was also alleged to have been unfit for human consumption. He vehemently denied the allegations, calling them politically motivated. A significant issue eroding Ruto's anti-corruption credibility includes the Rigathi Gachagua case. As mentioned, the DPP's move to drop a Kenya shillings 7.4 billion case against his deputy in September 2023 was widely perceived as a clear act of political interference to protect a powerful ally. There has been a pattern of high-profile corruption cases against figures who are now political allies of Ruto being withdrawn or stalling under his administration. For instance, cases against figures like Deputy President's aide Farouk Kibet and others have seen little progress. The systematic withdrawal or weakening of these cases has led to a powerful public perception that there exists a sacred circle of allies who are immune to prosecution, fundamentally undermining the legitimacy of the anti-corruption fight.
Kenya's anti-corruption arsenal is robust on paper. The cornerstone is the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act 2003, which criminalizes bribery, abuse of office, and unexplained wealth, with penalties up to 10 years imprisonment and fines triple the bribe amount. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2011 birthed the EACC, tasked with prevention, investigation, and prosecution, succeeding the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, KACC. The EACC has regional offices and powers to seize assets without conviction. Supporting laws include the Public Officer Ethics Act 2003 for lifestyle audits and the Leadership and Integrity Act 2012 mandating declarations for public officials. The ARA, under the 2009 Proceeds of Crime Act, handles forfeiture of illicit gains. The DPP and judiciary play key roles, though interference allegations persist. Internationally, Kenya adheres to the UN Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC. Challenges include legal gaps in EACC's mandate, such as delays in prosecutions and political meddling.
The societal implications of corruption in Kenya are profound. Corruption affects human rights and social justice, undermining public trust in government institutions. The impact on society is far-reaching, affecting everything from healthcare and education to infrastructure and economic development. Public reactions and protests against corruption have been significant. In recent years, there have been widespread protests calling for accountability and transparency in government operations. These protests highlight the public's frustration with corruption and their demand for change.
To mitigate and stop corruption in Kenya, several recommendations can be considered. Strengthening and enforcing existing laws. Ensure that anti-corruption laws are strictly enforced and those found guilty of corruption are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Enhance the independence and capacity of anti-corruption agencies to investigate and prosecute corruption cases without political interference. Promoting transparency and accountability. Implement transparent procurement processes and open government initiatives to enhance accountability. Regularly audit government agencies and publish the findings to ensure transparency. Public participation and whistleblowing. Encourage public participation in governance and decision-making processes to increase accountability. Protect whistleblowers who expose corrupt practices and provide incentives for reporting corruption. International cooperation. Strengthen international cooperation to recover stolen assets and prosecute those involved in cross-border corruption. collaborate with international organizations and other countries to share best practices and resources for combating corruption. Educational and cultural reforms. Promote anti-corruption education and awareness campaigns to foster a culture of integrity and ethical behavior. Encourage ethical leadership and integrity in public service through training and capacity building programs.
Corruption is not just economic sabotage, it's a human rights violation. It undermines the right to health, for example, diverted SHA funds leading to ghost beneficiaries, and education, delayed capitation payments. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, or KNCHR, marked African Anti-Corruption Day in July 2025 by linking graft to inequality and police abuses during protests. Extrajudicial killings and abductions during 2024 anti-tax demos tied to corruption-fueled debt highlight how crackdowns infringe on assembly and expression rights. Societally, corruption fosters distrust, with police extortion rampant and judicial bribes common. It hampers development, costing jobs and inflating living costs. Rural households spent just Shilling 7.20 daily on electricity amid graft in Kenya Power. As one tax user noted, Kenya borrows to steal, perpetuating intergenerational poverty. Grand corruption, per legal scholars, qualifies as a crime against humanity for denying basic dignity. Corruption remains a significant challenge in Kenya, with high-profile cases involving top officials and their allies. While there are laws and institutions in place to combat corruption, their effectiveness is often undermined by political interference and weak enforcement. To address this issue, it is crucial to strengthen legal frameworks, promote transparency and accountability, encourage public participation, enhance international cooperation, and foster a culture of integrity and ethical behavior.
For President Ruto, the ultimate test isn't another speech or another arrest of a mid-level official. It's whether he will allow his closest allies to be subjected to the same standard as everyone else. Without that, the crackdowns risk being seen not as a sincere war on graft, but as a political tool, creating a new cycle of the very impunity it promised to break. The soul of Kenya's governance and the economic well-being of its citizens hang in the balance.
Thank you for listening to the Platform Daily podcast. Please like, subscribe, and join our community in the comments to share insights and drive positive change.